Hello and welcome to the latest and very special episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. I can hardly believe I'm saying it, but it's the 150th time I've done this show since we launched in 2019. And in case you haven't heard the previous 149, this is the podcast where I talk to a designer, maker, artist, architect, or in this case, engineer about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their life and career. Think of it as a bit like Desert Island Discs, but with materials instead of music. To celebrate our anniversary, we have a very special guest. Harry Blakiston Houston is the founder of Insulate Ukraine. It goes without saying that since Russia's invasion, the nation has been literally shattered. To help combat some of the devastating effects of the war, the organisation has developed a $21 double-layer window made from PET, manufactured 100% locally and installed free of charge for those that need them. The windows keep families warm and create employment. They're helping Ukraine's population get through a deeply traumatic situation and are an important illustration of exactly why materials matter. Harry, thank you very much for doing this. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And I feel honoured to be the 150th person, which is a big milestone. Amazing.
You're very, very welcome. I literally couldn't think of anybody better. Was that intro okay, by the way?
That was great. That was fantastic. Is this your first engineer?
No. We have had engineers in the past. Neil Thomas talking about bamboo, and we've had material scientists and authors and all sorts of other people. You're a rare breed, engineers, on this podcast, I would admit. So, Harry, we have a well-worn tradition of asking people to describe their place of work. The idea being that listeners can learn something about the guest by the way they keep their studio or workshop. Obviously, it's slightly different for you. But do you have an office? And if you do, what does it look like?
I do have an office. I have a number of different places that I work from. My favorite place to end up working from is, it's very close to where I live in Ukraine, which I'm going to keep quiet because I would prefer, just in case something rather nasty or bit of stuff flies in.
Fair enough.
But it's right next to where I work, almost next door. And it's a tiny little small room with absolutely no distractions. And I have an electronics desk. I have a 3D printer. I have all of the sort of fun gizmos that you can go and play around with. A miter saw, a good table to go and do woodwork on and things like that. And a good bit of compute in it. And so I can kind of, from that station, prototype, I would say, pretty much anything I want to.
So you have a full-blown workshop in the Ukraine at your base?
It would be unfair to call it a full-blown workshop, but I think it's enough to do the job and create really rudimentary things. As I say, I think the best thing to prototype with, and I believe even Dyson did it with the initial Dyson Hoovers, is cardboard. And so actually you can do an awful lot with just pieces of cardboard and a pair of scissors. And I've tried to get that into all of our teams across Ukraine. They spend an awful lot of time just fooling around with cardboard these days.
Right. Interesting. I mean, how many people is Insulate Ukraine? How are you kind of structured?
We've learned an awful lot and changed an awful lot over our time in Ukraine. At first, we ran everything directly through the charity. That, because of the nature of the work we do, became a bureaucratic nightmare. I mean, we were literally having to record every single screw that went into any window in Ukraine. And so we reset it up. I sit on the charity side of things, but then all of these other local Ukrainians span off into a company that effectively contracts out to the charity. We are around, I believe, 40 people at the moment. So 40 people, pretty much all Ukrainian, installing windows on a day-to-day basis. And it's a big, happy team, which at the center of it, we've deeply ingrained 3 values. And that's been from day one. And those values are trust, very important thing in Ukraine. Innovation, we always want people to figure out different ways of solving problems, and empathy, both for the people that we go and do these window installations for, and for our colleagues and each other. So trust, innovation, and empathy are right through the organization.
So it isn't therefore a question of a load of Europeans or Brits parachuting in and kind of helping. You are creating employment on the ground.
Yes, I mean, it's actually, I see it as a large part of the charitable good that we do. We have effectively been able to provide work for the people that I would call the civic heroes of Ukraine, who are really the backbone of our organization. We have effectively provided them with a stable income and work through the window installations. And this is done on a per window basis. So it's very flexible type labor, which means we could sort of set them targets. If they miss those targets, that's okay. I mean, there are bombs coming in and big problems that they've got to deal with. But what it does, we pay very well per window installed in Ukrainian standards. A lot of our teams, and when I say civic heroes, they really are heroes because they go and take, for example, in Nikopol, most of our teams take the money they are paid and they put half of their money into running local halfway houses for drug addicts, people who have come out of prison or who have really fallen low. On top of having a war surrounding them, they often run the halfway houses for these type of guys and pay for that from their salaries from Insulate Ukraine, which is a weird byproduct of, I suppose, commerce.
It is. I was going to ask if that's something you encouraged or whether that happened organically.
That was them. I think in these areas where we operate is an average of 4 kilometers from the front line. You have to have some very specific reasons for hanging around in a place like that at a time like that. Quite often we find with the people we work with is often actually a religious element to these things. So, any sensible person in many ways is looking after themselves. They are looking after their families. They are getting the hell out of there and they're going and taking the opportunity to reestablish life elsewhere. These people stay behind to look after their neighbor, to look after the elderly who can't move, to look after people who are outside of their immediate family. They are in true servitude of the people around them and at their hearts, incredibly charitable themselves. So it's made me really, one of the happiest aspects in this is that ideally the repercussions of this work that we're doing in Ukraine into the future are going to mean that some of these civic heroes end up forming the backbone of the future reconstruction of the country. They are the people who actually have the money. They are beginning to sit on quite a valuable enterprise in Ukraine, and we're very happy to continue purchasing off them to do very good work in these areas.
Interesting. I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. It's worth pointing out for the historians among us that Operation Barbarossa, when Germany invaded Russia, started in June 1941 and the World War II finished in 1945. So this conflict has been going on longer than World War II. Sometimes I suspect that we, in Britain, get used to news stories and it's kind of easy to become inured to the images that you see. But obviously you've spent a lot of time close to the front line, as you say. Can you paint a personal picture for us of what it's like to live in Ukraine currently?
The main place I live is Kyiv. It is dangerous living in these areas, and I spend limited time there. And my teams, if I spend too long there, they tell me to go away because if something happens to me, then the money can still stop flowing. And we do have a weakness in that point. I need to make myself replaceable. But it's ever changing. It is a very, very, very weird place to be living and operating. This is when I'm talking about the frontline towns.
Sure.
The things that you wouldn't expect to be functioning are like coffee shops would still be running. You were able to get an absolutely sort of delicious Americano or flat white or something like that, even as you get right up to the front line. But then you go into the sort of red zones and things like that. There are no cars there because they will get bombed by FPV drones. There are fishing nets all over these cities and on the roads between different places. So you're effectively driving in tunnels.
The fishing nets are there to stop the drones.
Yeah, the idea is that then if a drone is flying overhead, it's not going to be able to get through the fishing net to then come and bomb you in your vehicle. And there are people though. There are a surprising number of people in a lot of these places. Life continues. Life goes on. It always makes me reflect back to a very, very famous image, which I think is burnt from maybe school into everyone's mind, which is that image of the guy with the milk bottles running across the rubble in London during the Blitz. So, it's something as basic as the delivery of milk. it has to keep continuing because life is there. Ukraine is very much the same thing. These places have been absolutely devastated. You do have entire villages that have been blown off the face of the earth. I mean, I met one lady who had actually lived through the Second World War, because a lot of the front line was actually in these same areas. Between it traveled through the Iziums, it traveled through the Le Mans and all that sort of stuff on the Eastern Front. And I remember asking her which one she thought was worse. Which sort of occasion she thought was worse. And she said that just the pure destruction that goes on nowadays because of the size of the machinery, because of the strength and power of these tanks, the artillery shells and all of that sort of stuff, they wipe out forests. It really is, it's quite difficult to comprehend until you've seen it firsthand.
Well, let's talk about, it's very difficult to know where to go from there, but let's talk about what you've been doing out there and the window that you've engineered, designed, created. First of all, and this may seem obvious, but how did you identify this particular problem?
The way you put that question is interesting, because I think the first thing that most people fall up on is not even really attempting or spending that much time trying to identify a problem. I spent an awful lot of time. I effectively went out to Ukraine at first in April 2022, a couple of months after the war had kicked off, in search of a problem that I could apply my skills to. I went through a number of different issues over the course of, I built my network after that first trip. I went through a number of different issues that I began to sort of prototype around, and I went, I don't quite see this working. I don't quite see it as having the longevity or the necessity, all that sort of stuff. And I was really looking for something that I hold very dearly in my work, which is exigency, which is effectively working on something with desperate need. And the reason that I'm interested in exigency is because I believe engineering is about iteration. It's about getting something out there, allowing the user to give feedback, improving the solution. And it's that compound interest of small improvements in a product that end up creating something which does a really, really, really fantastic job. And so it took me about 6 months until the right problem came back to me. And it was actually not in Ukraine, but rather standing in the line to the lying in state of the late Queen Elizabeth II in that very long queue.
Yes, I mean, kind of bizarrely, you had a eureka moment, where, kind of waiting to see the lying in state of the Queen.
I had a very close friend who had gone out to Ukraine just after I did my first trip. I called him up and I said, he's always been a bit of a lost spirit. And I said, I think I might have found where you're from, because he just sort of reminded me of a Ukrainian, really. They've got huge, huge hearts and they're quite funny, but sometimes quite confusing. And I'm endlessly fond of the Ukrainian people after the last few years. But he went out there and he just did some really heavy lifting, simple volunteering, carrying bags between a train and hotels on the border for a couple of months, often clocking up about 30 kilometers a day with bags in his hand for elderly people who were fleeing the front line. And he was just doing that for a few months, but he was one of the people I kept calling and going, what have you heard? What are the problems? What are the things that you think I might be able to go and work on? And he came back for the lying in state of the Queen, met up with two of my friends, and it was during that time that we had a long time to talk. It was a very long queue.
Yes, you weren't Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby.
No, no, exactly.
And he suggested the problem to you.
So he effectively said, look, winter's coming. There are millions of windows that have been shattered across Ukraine's front line, across Ukraine. Winter's coming and it's going to get really, really, really cold. You're talking quite often down to minus 20 during the weeks. You are talking situations in which people can freeze to death. That has happened we think about historical wars out there. And he said, could you do anything? Could you design a new type of window? And I went, that definitely sounds like something that would be possible. It's definitely within the realms of possibility. So that was when I kind of took that. And then I went and did some initial, what do we expect the scale of the problem to be? They did sort of Fermi estimates to roughly gauge how big we thought the problem would be. Tried to get photos of bomb damaged homes to figure out what materials we might have available during those initial for those initial windows. We actually tried to design something that people would be able to build literally from materials at home themselves. We don't do that so much anymore. It's become much less important on our requirements list. But our initial requirements list was like, we don't really know how easy it is for people to procure and get hold of specific materials right on Ukraine's front line. So we wanted something that they could literally take the materials from underneath their kitchen sink, put it into their window, and live comfortably in their home. That was the initial design spec. That has changed hugely over the course of time, which brings in the iterations.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that initial window, because it looks very different from the initial reports I read when you first started and what's on your website now. But that initial window itself, what was it made from? How did you make it?
So I think there's an important process behind the way a couple of concepts behind the design for that initial window. We started off with our requirements list. Now, what was important in terms of that sort of that punnet or matrix of requirements that we had? Safety. So it had to be shatterproof. That was really important. The ability to build it from materials at home. That was right up there. We thought that's all that we would have available. So that, sandbox us in. It had to be cheap. We didn't want them pulling out really expensive bits of their home because they were never going to be able to do that. It had to insulate. And then some of the desires were like, we wanted it to let light in. That would be good. It would be better if it was transparent. Give or take, that was the sort of list that we had. The very initial window was a triple glazed polyethylene window. Now, it was made from PVC pipes that you would find underneath your sink. So your effectively sink piping. It had pipe insulation. So you basically put these pipes together, you sellotape the corners of them, you put pipe insulation around that, and you sellotape the corners of that, you wrapped it, and that gave you your sort of internal layer. Then you put pipe insulation on, and then you wrap that again. And really what kind of inspired that solution is a concept called Dugard, or commonly known over here more as sort of frugal engineering. So we were really looking for something that minimized the materials we needed and just tried to get to something that was better than the status quo, which we could begin delivering to houses, which means we could begin getting into the important part, which is the iteration cycle.
Okay, Dugard. Tell me more about Dugard.
Dugard is the concept of design that the Indians use quite a lot.
Right.
So
okay.
You go and take, and there's a very good guy that actually might be worthwhile talking to one day on this called Jaideep Prabhu, who's written a book on this. He's a professor at Judge Business School in Cambridge and really wonderful guy. Dugard is effectively, if you see a motorbike in India that has a plank of wood on it, or it's strapped to a sort of horse cart type trailer, and suddenly there's a bunch of people sitting on that horse cart type trailer, and it's effectively been turned into a bus to motor people from one place to another. That is the concept of Dugard engineering. It is effectively very resource limited, using what you have around you to adapt a solution to solve the problem in the most simple way you possibly can. So it's kind of really mainly resource limited engineering.
So Dugard was the initial pillar of your thinking. We're in podcasts about materials. Should we talk about PET, polyethylene? I mean, what are its qualities, if you like?
The first window was polyethylene. The new window is PET.
Ah, okay.
PET would have been, at that point in time, it would have probably still been a better decision even then. But it is certainly a better decision now. I think it might be more useful. I've sort of given you a bit of perspective on where the window was then. I can give you a perspective on where the window is now, and then that kind of helps to...
That was going to be my next question, Harry, but that's fine. That's fine. You do that.
Okay.
Let's talk about where the window is now, because it is very different. I was on your website today, and it's really quite a long way away from the window you just described.
We have an issue now whereby our work spreads through word of mouth. We've done 80,000 windows, 30,000 homes within 20 kilometers of the front line. That is pretty much all effectively word of mouth. Now, it used to be the case that someone could walk past another person's home and notice that was the window that we had built because it looked a bit crap, and go, oh, but that's better than my plywood. So, who did that for you? Can I have their name and their number so I can get in touch with them? now the thing looks like glass, and we almost have an issue that people just don't know when it is our window or when it's not our window, unless you go and touch it, unless you're sort of inside the building. There are still constraints. There are still problems with the designs. But effectively what we have now, the standard one we're doing, which is for UPVC frame windows, is a double glazed, glueless, UPVC frame and PET glazing. So UPVC are your sort of white window frames, and the PET glazing is literally plastic bottle, plastic glazing panes to create a sealed unit, which then pops in instead of the glazing unit on a UPVC window. This means that it's entirely clear. It is much more impact resistant because of the PET plastic. It's glueless, which means even if a bomb does go off, of which still happens a lot. I mean, we've done hospitals where we've had to return 4 times. We quite often now only have to replace the glazing parts, which is about $2 for that sheet of glazing. Helps it being glueless. And it's self-install. So the latest version is one that actually we cut to size on new PVC windows. We cut to the size of the sizes that the person has measured and sent to us. We're able to deliver the window kits, as we're calling them, and a person puts them together, and within 5-10 minutes they've got a glazing unit which pretty much looks as good as glass but is shatterproof in their window. They don't insulate as well as double glazing, but they're not far off. We're about halfway between single and double glazing, and something we can improve on again.
So how many iterations to get from that initial window to where you are now? 3
quite big redesigns. There's always improvements going on in insulation. Insulation is always the real complex process. I think with a lot of stuff. I mean, it's if you think of us a little bit like, let's take the concept of IKEA. Okay, you look at almost any of IKEA's products; they tend to be self-sufficient standing objects on the floor. IKEA will make a chair. They'll make a bookshelf. They'll make curtains that hang on a rail. They don't really do anything that has to fit into the wonkiness of a home. So, walls deform and a window kind of has to work within those deformations to a certain extent, which is where we have to be a lot more careful about that installation process and all of that sort of stuff. Home Depot, things like that in America, I mean, they do windows. IKEA probably do windows, but you have to be pretty handy to get it installed, or reasonably handy. What we've really tried to do is build as much room for error into our designs as possible, which means if people measure slightly incorrectly, if they, if they're not able to screw things in or any of that sort of stuff, we want to make it as easy as possible so that their mistakes cost as little as possible.
Tolerances.
Yes, effectively it's tolerances to the installation process. And it's the installation process that's a complex one. This third design and the major redesign around it has really been taking a lot of that installation complexity and putting it into the design complexity. So we had to do all these clever things with like the final mile of the window. Now we're going to shimmy it into the actual design, which means any old babushka in this case can install the window.
It has been a surprisingly straightforward idea in many regards. I mean, do you ever wonder why nobody had done it before?
I think that we don't look hard enough for problems. I think that it comes back to us tending to solve the thing that sits in front of us. People love talking about their ideas, not necessarily the things they don't yet have ideas about. We haven't had a war in this country since basically the age at which plastic was at first invented. And in Ukraine, given enough time, I suspect someone may have done it. I think there are also very systematic problems within the humanitarian sector around the process of innovation. I mean, you're almost wrapped on the hand for doing any R&D rather than celebrated and pushed forward. There's very, very, very little systematic support for any research and development stuff.
That's interesting. I know nothing about this. So who's wrapping you on the hand?
Well, because the system has been built over many, many, many years to work in particular ways that are really all trying to be about, in some way, shape or form, transparency towards a person giving you money, people have become very unrisk tolerant. Okay. So, if you're talking R&D, what you are effectively doing is taking risks on something that you don't know whether it's going to work or not. If you are then trying to explain that back to His Majesty's government or something like that about how you managed to spend a huge amount of money and you've got no results to show for it because guess what? It didn't work, which is always possible in the R&D world, then someone gets fired. That's effectively the sort of process that happens. And so, there is a driver to set up systems which are well established, they are repeatable, they operate at a very, very, very large scale. And once they're there, because you know how to do it, there's not really any drivers to go and do that R&D. Like, why would you change the system if it's doing a decent job? You're keeping the people above you happy. You don't have to care too much about the customer because customer isn't paying, and it's very difficult for anyone to actually surpass your scale because there's effectively one charity that kind of rules each country. These things, it's like there's the Polish charity and then there's the Lithuanian charity and there's Swiss charity and I think there are no real rewards for research and development within that sector unless you're doing it from a corporate perspective, which is beginning to be what we're cottoning on to. But then, we come up with a new design, a new process, which is miles better by the words and, all the documentation we've done through now, all of these 80,000 installations. And we get told that despite giving our designs to other people and helping other people adopt the work we've done, we get called sort of monopolists. and I think sometimes it's just a misunderstanding of early stage capitalism and something that has brought about a huge amount of benefit across a huge number of sectors that really fuels R&D. It fuels the risk.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd never considered this, but it is a difference of where the money is coming from. It's a difference between a donor and an investor and what their expectations are, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, donors want a nice, clean report so that it sort of goes up the chain. The head of UNHCR wants a person below them at UNHCR to make sure it's nice and clean. The person above the head of UNHCR, who's probably someone in the FCDO or whatever it is now, they'll want something that's clean from them so then they can report it up to the Prime Minister, who just doesn't want any issues coming out of that area because they've got 1,000,001 other things to think of. It's going to be difficult to change this model. But that's kind of what I'm very interested in doing over the course of my life and what I will continue working on. And really, Insulate Ukraine has been cutting my teeth on that problem.
Well, we may well get into that towards the back end of the interview. We've got this window.
Yeah.
So we've got a product, which is important, obviously.
Yeah.
And a product that's gone through iterations, as we've discussed. But creating a system to install the windows, I guess, is even more vital. So how did you go about doing that?
So yeah, systems are the core of everything. I mean, I'm a big believer that problems are not solved by products, they're solved by systems. And, your product is a part of that. You need everything else that surrounds it. So I came up with the initial designs in Cambridge and in a makerspace in Cambridge, which was a wonderful place to work. I'm a big fan of makerspaces, particularly that one. And at first I tried to do just a YouTube video and shimmy it out as a YouTube video. And, that really didn't work at all. Nothing happened. But we got the first installations in eventually and they worked. The lady's house warmed up. She had been sleeping in her bathtub to keep warm during the winter nights. She was able to move back into her living room, rearrange her house. We gave someone back their home, effectively.
And this is Christmas 22, I think.
This is Christmas 22. So it's before I even arrived in Ukraine. So then I head out to Ukraine. And really heading out to Ukraine was about, well, how do we then, now that we have a solution and that we have a product, how do we systemize this and enable ourselves to actually spread this right across the country? The only way to find that out is to live next to the place that the problem exists. And so I went, obviously to the joy of my mother, straight out to about 70 kilometers away from the front line in a town that had been liberated about 3 weeks beforehand, called Izium. Izium is now infamous for, I believe it was the second largest mass grave they found in Ukraine. And I was, put up in the house of a poor young guy who had effectively been murdered by the Russians. And there were about 450 people found in the woods outside the town. I lived in a flat with no windows. So I made sure that I went and lived the life that I'm trying to help people. I wanted to make sure that I was happy with how good that help was. And it also gave me a great chance to iterate and improve in the evenings. So each day I would go out, do installations, figure out this thing, that thing. And then I would come back and I could iterate on the window and make sort of design tweaks and stuff.
And were you doing this by yourself at this stage, Harry?
At this stage, yeah, I was pretty much by myself. I had a couple of volunteers who came in and out in different places, really nice people who came and gave me a hand at different spots. At the very beginning, on that sort of first 3 weeks, I was joined by my closest friend, who's a writer called Louis Hall, and another American guy, just in case we got into trouble. It sort of meant we knew that the choppers might be flying in to sort of pull us out. And so I went there with them for 3 weeks, and then I went back to university. Then I went back out to continue building this system. And at the fundamental thing about this, when building a system, the way I tend to approach it is basically come up with all the different ideas that I can, wean out the ones that you definitely don't think will work because they're too difficult to set up, effectively run in parallel with almost everything else, and look for a signal that you should drop it. You're always looking for the thing you shouldn't do until you get right down to the one or two processes you can run with. And for example, we found that we tried to do it in 3 ways. One was spread it to other charitable organizations at that point and get them to run the work. We tried hiring people. We tried 4 ways. We tried hiring people locally and just paying per window installed. We tried going with local window installation companies and effectively contracting out. And we tried volunteers internally. Running
those simultaneously or one by one?
Simultaneously, effectively. We just sort of did it all at once. I talked to the contractors and said, here's how we do it. Could you please try? I want to see the results. I said to the charity, we're doing this over here. Ask me any questions you want. But you're left to your own devices. And with the volunteers, I would work directly with them if they came out to go and do some window installations. Then the fourth one was paying people. They work with us and the volunteers. You had volunteers working beside paid people. And the clear winner in this, for a whole bunch of different reasons, was the paid model. Was effectively paying local workers from those areas who didn't have to be skilled labor for the job of building and installing windows as quickly as they could across these towns. And we would pay on a per window basis. And this worked for many different reasons. It worked because it's much easier to then tell donors how many windows they're going to be paying for because you've got effectively a fixed labor cost per window. It works because you're giving these people cash, which is what we talked about early on, and the sort of financial benefits, the sort of charitable financial benefits of that. You're actually building up human capital resilience and economic resilience in these areas. And it worked because we could exercise quality control. And, volunteers are out there for 2 weeks. They care, but you're having to retrain them. If I have some of our guys individually have built 5,000 windows themselves. I mean, they are so good at it by this point. And then they become the fuel that does the small tweaks for all of those installation challenges. They're the guys who begin to figure that out and feedback problems.
This is just a reminder that Material Matters Copenhagen is nearly upon us. It runs from the 10th to the 12th of June at Ukraine House, Gamble Dock. The event, which is part of 3 days of design, contains 19 exhibitors from across the globe, all united by their profound interest in material intelligence. Highlights include the American Hardwood Export Council, which will be presenting a new immersive exhibition, Wood for the Trees. Dutch brand iFungi is back, showing furniture and lighting made from a mycelium composite, and Spanish company Birdmind will be there with a material fashioned from rice husks. Look out too for Only Natural, a global initiative championing the use of natural materials, which will be showcasing a selection of award-winning projects from its international student design competition. Recraft Design Studio has works made from demolition waste, and Crafting Plastics and Loop Loop will be there, joining forces to launch new products. For more details, go to our website, materialmatters.design. That's materialmatters.design. Also, we're still looking for exhibitors for our London event in September. We have a new venue, Unlocked Shoreditch, and will be part of Shoreditch Design Week. The building is filling up nicely, and if you're interested in taking part, email us at hello@materialmatters.design. That's hello@materialmatters.design. It's interesting, as you were saying initially, the windows were so badly done that people could see them, and therefore when they could see that they wanted them, because despite the fact they weren't as good as they are now, but
they were ugly.
They were still better than boards. So how do people find you now?
Word of mouth.
Still word of mouth.
We are, still word of mouth. We're very well known in the towns we operate. Very well known. I mean, you ask people about us, pretty much everyone in these towns knows about us. We have bordering on unrivaled access to the frontline administrations. We work very closely with all of the frontline military administrations. After doing 30-ish thousand buildings in across a couple of towns, and having stayed there for many, many years now, you build up a reputation, and that's effectively what keeps us going in that way now. That's going to have to change a little bit at the next stage of the work that we're doing, which is about spreading this outside of the Kherson, Nikopol, Sloviansk, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, to every single area of the front line. That's what we're trying to unlock with this next variant of the window. And so we will get back into this challenge of, well, how do people find out about us? But we have a couple of tricks up our sleeve. Okay.
Can we talk a little about your background?
Yeah.
Harry, because you grew up on a farm in Northern Ireland. Were you always making things as a child?
Badly. I think I was never, I like to pull, I think I like to pull things apart more than I like to put them together. And I like my woodwork a lot. My godfather was a carpenter. I actually got very much into mathematics at latter stages, and I've kind of gone back into the prototyping and building more recently. I used to do quite good job at building things for people's parties. That was always fun.
Oh, what kind of things?
We did everything from giant teddy bears made out of hay to not particularly special, but to lampshades and floating clouds that would sit in the barn, and you put a sort of light bulb in. Quite a lot of almost stagecraft. I built stages before. It was only really when I got to the PhD at Cambridge that I went back in and I was like, I really want to do some more hardware stuff, and I really want to just get good enough with prototyping in the sort of hardware sphere.
But when did you decide you wanted to be an engineer?
It was post-school. At first, I had actually applied to do physics and maths joint honours at Edinburgh. I mean, I would have been way too boring to come onto this podcast if I had done that, I'm sure.
I don't think that's true, just so you know.
But yes, no, I love maths. I'm a big fan of maths. It's my absolute favourite of the subjects, and I do love physics. And I looked at this course down at Bristol, which was called Engineering Mathematics, and it sort of really appealed to me, that crossover between the use of effectively mathematics in the real world, which is kind of what interests me most about mathematics, is its real world applications. And then that got me into, like all engineers today, it got me into computers and building things on that. And then you kind of get to a point where you go, well, now I've got all of this stuff. What can I then? I get a bit bored of looking at the screen the whole time. I kind of want to start fiddling around with things. And I think that's then what drew me into a little bit more robotics, mechatronics, and that type of, CAD and all of those sort of things, really.
Yeah. I'm always deeply jealous of people for whom figures kind of dance, because they don't for me. But yeah, so you studied engineering and mathematics at Bristol University, as you said, before heading to Cambridge to a PhD in machine learning within crop sciences. What does that entail?
We were looking at designing new generations of breeding algorithms. So, effectively everything that you eat in your cereal or the milk that you drink and all of that sort of stuff has gone through a very, very, very long line of selective breeding. This started off from really, the field kind of got kicked off with Fisher in, I've got to remember back, but I think it was actually might have been a little bit in response to the First World War, but at the National Institute of Agricultural Botany and in Cambridge, with linear mixed effects models. I'm a big fan of a field of statistics or machine learning called Gaussian processes, but I unfortunately, I mean, I suppose my life has taken a turn, and whilst I do still read books on such topics, and I'm very keen in time to I think have a bit of quiet once more in Cambridge Meadows and go and get my head stuck into academic papers. Life has had different plans, and I'm kind of just having to go with the flow on those for the moment.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously, you've put all this on hold at the moment. Was that a difficult decision?
Yeah, it was. It was a very difficult decision. It was one that was actually informed by slightly surprising things. So I'm Catholic background. Irish Catholic family, and we have patron saints as our sort of our confirmation name. So my confirmation name is Francis, after Saint Francis of Assisi, who is a patron saint of animals. Now, I have a small prayer that I say to St. Francis, which, because of various reasons, which is basically make the next step clear and give me the strength to pursue it. I don't want the whole plan. I just want what's the next action I'm going to take. And I was coming back from Izium, and, you're coming back from this town that's just seen the most horrific time. I was coming back from Izium for my aunt's funeral. And I'm really torn at this point. I'm still at Cambridge. If I'm going to come back out to Ukraine, I'm going to have to put my PhD on hold. I know the importance of the work we're doing in Ukraine, but I'm enjoying the PhD, and I've got good opportunities coming with it. And it's difficult, as all PhDs are, but I'm ready to keep going if for another couple of years. And I'm going back and I'm praying to St. Francis. I'm saying, just make the next step clear, and I'll find the strength to pursue it. Give me the strength to pursue it. And I get to my aunt's funeral, and the very, very first prayer at that funeral was St. Francis's peace prayer. St. Francis is also the patron saint of war. And his peace prayer goes, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Doubt, faith. Despair, hope. Darkness, light. Sadness, joy. O divine master. It goes on.
Which is what Margaret Thatcher said, wasn't it?
Did she?
When she took office in 1979. Yeah, I believe so. She quoted St. Francis of Assisi.
Did she?
Listeners can come in and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But it was almost a comical-esque slap in the face, because I didn't really realize he was patron saint of peace at that time. And I went, well, okay, I suppose that has to be my choice made. But it kind of goes back to this point that to go and run at something like Ukraine at that point in time takes a slight bit of lack of sensibility. It's not the easiest, most obvious path to go down. It's not necessarily going to pay off. I think you do have to effectively be putting servitude to other people in front of servitude to yourself. The likelihood on that course is that actually you are going to do damage to your prospect, or what we would consider in the West as your prospects in life. And really, it's been very fortuitous that that has gone in a direction where we are doing as well as we're doing, because it could have been, at the end of the day, well done, Harry, you went back out to Cambridge, you did 1,000 windows or something, and then you're back, and now you don't have a PhD, and everyone thinks you're a bit nuts. And it is a sort of possible counterfactual of what if it had gone in that way. But there is fortune in all things, and I think it's a good case where it favours the bold or the brave.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, it's an interesting one, Harry, because I do a bit of research on my guests, and I realised that in 150 episodes there are two topics that I'd never really touched on. One of which was religion. And, I was going to ask you about St. Francis of Assisi. And the other one is boarding school.
Right.
Because you went to Ampleforth in North Yorkshire, which was founded by Benedictine monks, 1803. The school says that its primary concern is to provide pupils with not just academic, sporting and other achievements, but also a spiritual compass for life, moral principles to give guidance in a secular world within a context where the Benedictine ethos permeates pupils' experience. I'm intrigued. Did that experience at Ampleforth also shape your thinking?
Yes, I think it was very formative for it. The important bit of Ampleforth, it's a funny old place. So I boarded from the age of 6 years old. I was at boarding school in Ireland before that, in a sort of very open free school called Headford, where we didn't really do any work. And I sort of arrived in England after that. And I think they thought, who's this guy who's literally never been to school before, because we were just playing the entire time. And then shipped off to Ampleforth. And at Ampleforth, the most important aspect of it, in my opinion, were the monks. I mean, it wasn't a sort of great science institution. We did have some very nice labs built, but I don't think the teaching was there were some very good teachers, but not all of the teaching was of the highest standard at all. But what was really, really important was the sort of values-driven education, with the almost charitable parts of school life, the care for one's neighbour, the sort of instillment of belief in oneself that I think gets... It's funny if you look at the alumni from that school, quite often what they end up being in are things like the military. And a lot of that, I think, is driven by the idea of servitude. A lot of them go into the humanitarian sector, and a lot of them end up becoming writers and things like that. We basically don't make very good sort of desk people, I think, afterwards the entire time.
Why is that? What do the monks have you doing?
Well, there's something in Catholicism which is... you ask for forgiveness and you tend to get it to some extent, which is quite a dangerous concept as a young guy. It basically means you can get up to no good, and then as long as you are actually genuinely sorry for it, or good at showing that you're sorry, then you might get a rap on the knuckles and sent on. But I actually think a little bit deeper than that. What it is you are surrounded by, for the most part, these extraordinarily brave men who I would say monks are. I mean, a lot of the time they've made this incredibly difficult to understand decision of living effectively in chastity for their entire lives, giving up all of their stuff, basically living in a sort of community. And they come from all sorts of areas, these guys. I mean, some of them were like bankers in London before, and they suddenly have these things called vocations, and they'll recount a story of their vocation to you, and it basically told them at some point to go up to Ampleforth, and that's how they should go and serve God and serve in life. And I mean, sadly, I think there were two that were very dear to me. One, funnily enough, I'm actually seeing tomorrow, which will be very nice. I haven't seen him for many years, but we're going for dinner with a few friends. The other one died during the war, and he saw people off to the Second World War as well. There's a brilliant book called about Robert Nairac. So he knew Robert Nairac quite well, who was also at the school, who died during the Troubles, was murdered during the Troubles. And often he talks about servitude, and he would just talk about the importance of servitude and the care of servitude. And it's really, the charitable aspect of life is really, really celebrated at that school. It's not how to succeed. It's not really a one-on-one on how to succeed. It's a 101. It's a 101 on how to live a Christian life effectively. And I have found those lessons very important in the work that I'm doing, weirdly.
No, I think that's entirely understandable. Entirely understandable. Going back to brass tacks now, I'll move away from British boarding school and religion.
Well, you got rich boarding school and religion in one conversation, which if they were two missing topics was
When you're doing a project like this, how do you assess its impact? I know you've touched on this a little bit, but presumably you have key sponsors that you need to provide them with data, or how does this work? How do you know, or how do you persuade people that you've done a good job? Is it purely statistics?
Stories.
Yeah. Okay.
So, we've flipped when we're doing our reporting back. You get different donors who need different things. If it's an institutional donor, it's more about the data and all of that sort of stuff. If it's a individual who's giving, $15, $20 for a window, or a person who's granting a couple from a sort of trust somewhere or corporate trust, then really what you do is you've got to give a good narrative back to them. The way we began to think of this is that it is actually, in many ways, our first sales or fundraising document. That this is our greatest opportunity to educate the person on the work we're doing and the importance of it and how it impacts people's lives. And we have an awful lot of data to do that with. And that's the other thing. Like, we do collect a lot of information. Every single home we go into, we have a 7 touch point process whereby we're calling them and building up, sort of trust beforehand. And it goes all the way through to us asking them questions and doing analysis on what the impact has been of their windows. We get photos from every single property we go into, and we link people's donations directly to those properties so they know exactly who they've helped and when they've helped. And it's a pretty difficult to sort of, that's part of the system, this wider thing of how you raise money and report what you've done back to your donors. It comes into this stuff. And then we've just engaged our team in changing it, tweaking it, improving it, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm very proud, actually. And I have to say, Tally, who works closely with me, has now done such a good job on our report that I sent it to a guy who runs a company. I sent it to a guy, Raspberry Pi, who are one of our donors, the sort of computer company. And he looked at it and he said, this is an absolutely exceptional report. We at Raspberry Pi could actually really learn something from the work you've done here. And, we're tiny. We're absolutely tiny, but I think we really do have these values of care for the people we're helping, innovation, trust, and empathy. And the empathy is a bit that we really care about people giving us and entrusting us with their money to try and go and do something good with it, whereby all they're going to get back is effectively a thank you and a piece of paper. And for us, that's a really important responsibility. I mean, we take that really, 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 really seriously. It's a big thing if someone's giving you their hard-earned money to go and do good with it. And just, they're not able to get that much oversight. So we try and do as much as possible to give back.
Sure. We're coming to the end of our time, unfortunately. So I'm intrigued, what does the future hold for you, Harry? Is there a moment where your job is done? I mean, is that at the end of the war? Are you there, until you see a conclusion?
If I could refer back to the words of St. Francis, it was easy, but next step and giving the strength to pursue it. But no, I mean, if I look about the larger planning around what we do, Insulate Ukraine has been a proof of concept of how an engineer could go and implement themselves and start working within this sector. My next step within this is to try and systemize this. I want to pull down those barriers. I want to get engineers into the sector, all over the sector. I want to hit that sector with so much innovation that the large organizations no longer know what to do with all of these different things coming in different directions and have no choice but to start funding it. I really want more engineers to work there because I think the world needs it. I think we need a rethink of our development sector. And, now budgets are dropping across France, across the UK, across the US. It's been absolutely thrown out the window. All over the Western world, there's less and less money into development. There are opportunities to take some of this development and fund it in different ways. And I think engineers, designers, architects, all of these sort of creative professions have a very large role to play in that. And my goal is going to be to try and make it easier. And that's the charity is called FI, which is in the UK, and it's effectively the fundraiser of the partner of Insulate Ukraine.
I have to ask this question. Having been on the ground in Ukraine for as long as you have, do you think they can win the war?
Yes, I think the war can always be won. But I also think they can lose it. So I think they could win the war. I think they can lose it. I have been a proponent, and I've been a proponent of this for quite a long period of time, that we need to effectively hope for the best and prepare for the worst. There is a reasonable chance that this war just goes on and on and on and on and on. And that doesn't mean us in the UK can effectively be like, well, why isn't it over yet? Why are you not just giving up these bits of land and things like that? They are facing a satanic neighbor. I mean, this neighbor is dropping butterfly mines in civilian areas where children will pick them up doesn't help their military objectives or anything like that. They are actively bombing humanitarians. They are doing all of that sort of stuff. And the Ukrainians know they just can't go, oh yes, of course we'll trust these people. So they are in it as an exit for existential reasons, whereby if they're not fighting, then it might be the end of their families, of their country, of all of that sort of stuff. So I think there's a chance that it could go on for an awfully long time. And so I think people need to be ready for that and try and do stuff to support them. And I wish we did more as a nation. I honestly, I'm going to say, I wish we had people on the ground. I wish our soldiers were out there fighting with the Ukrainians. I think it would be a smart thing to do at this time. It is its own sovereign nation. I think it will reap dividends in future, both for us backing a very, very, very impressive nation, but also because we have to stick up for the very values that we represent, which are democracy, freedom, individuality. That is the main thing that Ukrainians are defending, the rights of the individual over the state. And if people want to donate to Insulate Ukraine, where can they do that? Insulate-Ukraine.org, $20-ish will put in a window. It's about 60 to 80 for a home. You start going bigger than that and you really are looking at hospitals, buildings, all of this sort of stuff. The one that really makes a difference for us is repeat regular donations, month to month. It allows us to plan as a charity. And if you do have any questions, you'll still just get in touch with me and you'll either talk to one of the team or myself. Yeah, insulateukraine.org. Very good. Well, now you know, listeners, I will put the link in the blurb that comes with the episode. So hopefully people will know where to find you. Thank you, Grant. No, that's a complete pleasure. Harry, thank you so much for that. It was wonderful to have you on my 150th show. I don't know if enjoy was the right word, but it was a fascinating hour. Thank you very much. Thank you. To find out more about Insulate Ukraine and donate, go to insulate-ukraine.org. I'll also put that link in the blurb that comes with the show. You can go to our website to hear other podcasts that I've done, to sign up to our newsletter, and to find out all about the various events we'll be running in 2026, including Material Matters Copenhagen. One more thing, it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £3.50 a month, you can receive invites to various Material Matters events, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help we can offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message of the importance of materials, skill, craft, and design to a whole new audience. So that's it, 150 episodes done. Thank you to Sam, who's done all the sound production from the start, to my business partner William, to Anna for all her advice. Thanks also go to the supporters on Patreon, without whom this would not have been possible. Thank you so much, everyone. And finally, thank you all very much for listening.